It was 6:13 a.m. when the HOA president marched onto my dock with two officers and a clipboard. "Mr. Cole, we've received reports of indecent activity," she said, chin-high voice, sugared and sharp. The indecent activity, my wife Sophia, doing sunrise yoga on our cedar deck, on our land, on our tax bill. Officer Ramirez glanced at the water board. Officer Keene adjusted his vest. But Arlene Whitaker never broke eye contact with me. She wasn't here for yoga. She was here for our lake house. Sophia stepped back inside, breath steady, eyes soft. She didn't argue. She didn't explain. She just nodded like she'd been expecting this knock. That unsettled me more than the badges. I'd married a woman who handled dust storms and medevac drills without flinching. Yet she let a stranger tell her how to stretch on her own porch. Arlene tapped the clipboard. Complaints about foreign rituals. Mr. Cole. Our community values decorum. She dragged out values like she owned the word. I felt my jaw set. Sophia touched my wrist, one light squeeze that said, "Don't." She looked almost relieved the circus had arrived. I swallowed my anger. Her calm told me this was the opening move. By noon, the officers were gone, but Arlene's perfume still hung over the dock like a warning flare. I took Sophia inside, shut the slider, and asked the question burnt into my throat. "Why didn't you push back?" She poured coffee, added 2 sugars, and watched the ripples settle. "Because people like Arlene come looking for noise," she said, "and noise hides their fingerprints. Let them think I'm manageable." The word manageable bothered me more than indecent. It sounded like a trap that had my name on it. By afternoon, the notice appeared on our mailbox, a cream envelope, embossed with the Pine Landing crest, and a checklist pretending to be kindness. Trim lakeside willow to regulation height. Replace mailbox to approved bronze model. Submit cultural sensitivity plan for community cohesion. I read it twice because item 3 sounded like satire, until I saw Arlene's signature. Sophia underlined dates, circled the phrasing about daily fines, and clipped it to a folder. "Paper trail," she murmured. "Evidence likes calm hands." I heard calm and felt anything but. That evening, Arlene staged a lesson on our lawn. She arrived with a tape measure, 2 flags, and a smile that never reached her eyes. "Sophia bright colors can read aggressive around the lake," she said, nodding at my wife's marigold sweatshirt. "Subtlety communicates respect." She planted flags by the hydrangeas, declared our dock light a hazard, and suggested replacing our oak with an approved pear. Her tone lived somewhere between sermon and sales pitch. Sophia apologized, asked for written guidance, and offered tea. Arlene declined, cataloged everything. I tried to catch Sophia's eye after Arlene left, ready to vent about pears flags and the mailbox. She was already at the dining table phone on airplane mode, the envelope open beside a legal pad. She numbered bullet points without glancing down origin of complaint, exact phrasing witnesses, present physical markers positioned. I stood in the doorway and realized I was watching someone rehearse more than react. "You're awfully organized for a neighborly scolding," I said. She smiled, tired. "You fix chairs, Ben. I fix patterns, too." The next morning, she suggested a walk not for exercise, but for roots. We cut along Harbor Lane, past the Whitaker's signs, past Grace Ellison's azaleas, that somehow escaped citation. Neighbors waved with tight mouths. Owen Park kept his head down while blowing leaves, then turned his blower off as we passed. "Rough movin', huh?" he muttered. She did the same to a Coast Guard family 2 summers back. He wouldn't give details, a shrug that felt like a warning label. Sophia filed his name without breaking stride. On day 3, the invoice masquerading as guidance arrived. Approved landscaping, $15,000. Mailbox replacement, $8,000. Driveway resurfacing to match aesthetic standards, $12,000 due in 30 days to avoid daily penalties. I read the totals twice, then a third time, because rage fuzzed the numbers. "She expects us to fold," I said. Sophia photographed each page on a flat-lit background, saved copies, and slipped the originals into a waterproof sleeve. "She expects us to argue," she corrected. Silence makes her confident. Confidence makes her careless. The second police visit landed on a Saturday, as if harassment kept business hours. 2 cruisers idled by our mailbox, while Arlene explained foreign vocalizations coming from our porch. We'd been debating barbecue rubs. Officer Ramirez rolled his eyes slightly. I almost missed it. Everything okay here, Mr. Cole? He asked. Better than okay. Sophia answered, voice small, shoulders rounded. I'm learning the rules. She let the words hang like laundry. When the cruisers left, she wrote the time badge numbers and Arlene's phrases as they'd been delivered. I'm calling a lawyer, I said, grabbing my keys. Sophia shut the drawer with 2 fingers. Not yet. The calm in her voice set off alarms in mine. You think compliance will buy us mercy? She shook her head. I think arrogance writes its affidavit. She walked me through nothing and everything. Keep routines. Wave to neighbors, record details, never bite the bait. Arlene wants a scene. Give her silence. I wanted thunder. Instead, I learned the sound of a trap being baited by patience, inch by inch. That night, I opened the county records portal, the one I usually visited to check permits for furniture commissions. I typed Whitaker into the search bar and fell down a staircase of transactions listings, shepherded sales, closed a string of commissions, hugging the shoreline like barnacles. 3 addresses jumped out sold under appraisal to shell LLCs with names. I cross-checked dates against HOA complaints, archived in minutes. The overlap stabbed like neon. I printed nothing. I wrote everything by hand the way my dad taught me when paper mattered. Sunday after service. Owen lingered by his truck with the hood up, pretending to check coolant, while watching the road. I brought 2 coffees and a tone. You ever sell under pressure, I asked. He stared into the engine like it contained confession. Sold my sister's place when her husband shipped out, he said finally. Anonymous complaints. Fine stories whispered about noise at night. He zipped his jacket. The day was warm. If you stay, stay smart. He took the coffee, didn't thank me, and relieved I'd asked. Back home, Sophia was on the deck, with a measuring wheel the kind contractors use to map driveways. She wasn't measuring anything we planned to change. She was measuring where Arlene had planted flags and how far the sound carried toward the road. On the kitchen island, a recorder sat beside a notepad labeled Call Log. Times, subjects, exact words. She attached a tiny camera to the eave, hidden in a birdhouse I'd carved years ago. For the chickadees, she said. I heard the metal under her humor. Monday brought a flyer to our door, advertising a community mentoring circle hosted by Arlene. The topic line read, Integrating Newcomers with Grace. Sophia penciled the date onto our calendar like she was signing up for a bake sale. I planned my protests, listed amendments in my head, and then stopped when I saw her expression. She wanted that room. She wanted witnesses. We'll bring cookies, she said, unwrapping a store-bought tray and placing them on our china. Weaponizing politeness felt outrageous. It felt like warm-up before games. Warm-up. The circle met in the boathouse windows, cracked to the lake a tray of lemonade, sweating on a folding table. Arlene opened with a speech about standards and harmony, then invited questions the emperor granting petitions. Sophia lifted her hand first. I'm still learning, she said softly. Could you show me how to be more appropriate? The word appropriate landed with a smug thud. Arlene beamed. She proposed a mentorship checks and a buddy system for choices. I watched Sophia nod and realized she was mapping a schedule. Afterward, we carried our cookie tray home like a trophy and a warning. You just signed up to be babysat, I said. Sophia locked the door, set the tray down, and looked at me like a surgeon about to explain a procedure. I signed up for predictable contact, she corrected. Predictable contact with documentation becomes pattern. Pattern becomes proof. I rubbed my temples. Proof of what she paused. Of intent of targeting of a scheme bigger than our street. Then she added casually, I'll need her calling authorities. The third call came 2 days later, an accusation about damage to community assets that boiled down to a cracked board on a bench we never used. Arlene arrived flanked by a neighbor and a phone. Officer Keene asked for statements. Sophia's hands shook as she described routine, then steadied as she requested incident numbers report copies and body cam timestamps. Keene's eyebrows climbed. When the cruisers left, I cornered her in the pantry. "Who are you?" I asked. "Someone who keeps promises," she said. "Trust me longer." That was the hinge the moment the door inside me swung from outrage to alignment. I stopped planning speeches and started laying out folders. I sharpened pencils, labeled tabs, memorized badge names, and cleaned the birdhouse lens dusk. When Arlene's SUV slowed by our curb, I didn't clench. I noted the time. I wasn't abandoning pride. I was conserving it. "How long do we play quiet?" I asked one night as the lake breathed against the rocks. "Until she thinks she's untouchable," Sophia said. Then we knocked politely. The surprise didn't arrive with sirens. It arrived in envelopes. On Thursday, 3 letters from different branches of the HOA landed in our box, each one citing a different rule we'd never heard of. One demanded a permit for the birdhouse camera I'd installed years before. Another accused Sophia of violating a quiet hours clause by unrolling a yoga mat at dawn. The last one threatened daily fines if we didn't submit a cultural integration plan for review. Sophia smoothed each page flat with her palm, photographed them, and clipped them beneath a tab labeled Whittaker Escalation. Friday evening, the unexpected part showed up in our driveway wearing sneakers and a varsity jacket. Arlene's son Chase walked over like he'd been dared, eyes flicking between our porch camera and the lake. "My mom says you're filming kids," he blurted loud enough for the cedar trees to testify. Sophia didn't bristle. She walked to the edge of the steps, keeping her hands visible, and asked him a question that sounded simple and wasn't. "Would you repeat that for me on video, please?" Chase backed up a foot, then another. That night, the lake turned to ink, and the wind brought voices across the water like gossip on rails. Grace's patio lights were on, and I could hear Arlene telling her audience how some cultures don't understand boundaries. Sophia wrote 2 lines in her notebook and closed it like a prayer book. Saturday morning, the sirens finally came back, but the surprise wasn't the cars. It was the officer in the passenger seat. Not Ramirez or Keene, someone new, someone in plain clothes, with a badge clipped to a belt and the awareness of a field medic. He let the uniform do the talking while he watched Sophia watch Arlene. "We've had multiple reports," Officer Keene said, eyes tired, pen ready. "Foreign rituals, potential safety issues, community distress." "I'd like copies of each report," Sophia answered, voice small but precise. Arlene laughed in a way that wanted an audience. "She's new," she told the officer. "She doesn't know the process." The bench incident should have ended there, but Arlene needed momentum, like fire needs air. By afternoon, she'd posted on the neighborhood app, tagging half the lake, describing a pattern with bullet points that sounded clinical and smelled like gasoline. Sophia screenshotted every word and archived the thread before any edits could scrub intent. She walked across the street with a plate of blueberry muffins and an apology. For the confusion, she told Arlene, "Could you mentor me?" The mentoring began as walkthroughs and became inspections. Arlene measured setbacks, counted steps from our door to the dock, and corrected the direction of our doormat, like it could signal loyalty to a flag. Sophia took notes, asked for templates, and requested all guidance in writing so I don't forget. The 4th police visit cracked something I didn't know could crack my certainty that Sophia needed my protection first and my patience second. It started with an anonymous tip about raised voices and ended with Officer Ramirez documenting a pattern of false calls. After he left, Sophia sat on the bottom stair, breathing through her nose, eyes, glossy hands trembling just enough to read on camera. Then she whispered, "Did you see the way he emphasized pattern?" I saw it, and I saw her see it, and suddenly every question I'd been swallowing lined up like dominoes. And the questions Sophia asked officers weren't the questions of a novice. They were calibrated to pull procedure into the open, where cameras could see it. I found her at the dining table, documents spread like a map, highlighters sorted by purpose instead of color. "Soph," I said quietly, "what are we doing?" "We're teaching a predator to step into daylight," she said. "And we're letting her choose the spotlight so she can't complain about the brightness later." "You're not just protecting us." I said the words, tasting like realization. "Who else?" "Soph." She met my eyes and I saw it, the weight, the scope. I wanted to be angry at the secrets, but anger would have been a luxury purchase we couldn't afford. So instead, I asked the question that mattered. What do you need from me? Sophia exhaled like someone setting down a pack after a long ridge climb. Consistency, routine, no improvising. And when she finally calls above the local level, don't flinch. Above local, I repeated, though I knew. She nodded. HOA queens love escalation when they think the ground is theirs. I need her to feel untouchable enough to dial federal. The idea sounded like jumping off the dock in January and calling it a plan. Why the feds, I asked. Because civil rights and fraud cross city lines, she said. And because sunlight is hottest there. The next escalation came disguised as help. Arlene delivered a resource packet compiled by a community liaison with phone numbers for counseling veterans services and a hotline that looked official until you read the footer. The number wasn't the VA. It routed to a private office 2 towns over where, according to county records, Arlene's brokerage held a silent partnership. Sophia dialed on speaker and asked polite questions until the receptionist suggested relocation services for households under stress. There it is, Sophia said after she hung up. The exit ramp she wants us to take. Sunday evening, we hosted Owen for burgers, the kind of neighborly cover that keeps nosy people guessing. He brought a 6-pack and a silence he wore like rain gear. While smoke curled off the grill, he told us about a Marine couple who'd sold fast after a season of anonymous concerns. He didn't say Arlene's name, but the outline matched her voice. Sophia listened more than she spoke, and before he left, handed him a card with a P.O. box and a date. If you remember details later, send them there, she said. Don't put your name. The 5th police call was the ugliest a domestic disturbance complaint, timed for sunset, the hour when sound carries and imaginations sprint. We were shelling corn on the back steps when the cars rolled in, and Arlene materialized like a stage cue. Officer Ramirez asked routine questions. Officer Keene kept scanning the yard as if truth might be hiding under the hydrangeas. Sophia's voice shook. Mine tried not to. Then she looked at Ramirez with a kind of rehearsed fragility and asked, "Can you tell me what happens if someone lies to police more than once?" He glanced at Arlene before answering, which was the point. "It's a crime," he said. "It can be charged." Sophia nodded like a student, thanked him, and wrote the statute number he cited on her pad. That was the night I stopped asking whether we should move. I asked whether Arlene would. Sophia laid out a timeline with blue tape on the wall: calls, notices, drive-bys, mentorship dates, app posts. She added a column labeled outside contacts. When that column fills, she said, we're close. Close to what she looked at me like we were standing at the edge of a frozen lake, and I was asking about the temperature. Close to federal. The real unexpected turn didn't come from Arlene. It came from Sophia. She woke me at 5:40 a.m., the lake still pewter, and said, "We need groceries." We drove to a store 20 minutes away where no one knew our faces. In aisle 9, she bought a $3 notebook and a disposable phone. At the register, she paid cash, and outside, she handed me the bag. If she pushes this to a hotline or a tip line, she said this is the number she'll be given to call back. We're going to bait a return call, I asked, incredulous, and to my own surprise willing. She smiled without warmth. We're going to collect the moment she believes she's the sheriff of America. By week's end, the outside contacts column had names a county code officer, Arlene CC'd, on an email, a social worker looped into a welfare check request, and the not VA hotline. Sophia's birdhouse lens caught Arlene coaching Grace on phrasing use safety words. Noise, distress, cultural misunderstanding. She handed the audio to our folder, like a cashier dropping change into a till. Now we wait for her to dial higher, Sophia said. And when she does, Ben, that's when I stop pretending I can't breathe. Sunday started like 1,000 Sundays at the lake fog, lifting gulls, heckling the dock. But nothing in me felt ordinary. I'd spent weeks rehearsing speeches I never gave. Now I wanted instruction, not catharsis. Sophia was already at the table with her folders, hair tied back, a pen tucked behind one ear like a carpenter's pencil. She didn't look scared. She looked like a project manager who had finally gotten the right subcontractor. Teach me, I said, palms up. No pride, no caveats. Her shoulders eased a fraction as if I'd set down a heavy box she'd been pretending was light. Okay, she said. Rules first. Rule 1, never argue in the open. If Arlene creates a scene, narrate calmly for the camera. For the record, you are standing on my property. Please leave. Rule 2, ask for everything in writing citations. Standards, names the exact rulebook page. Rule 3, document like a court reporter, times phrasing, who stood where. Rule 4, don't improvise, even if your lungs want fire. Our job is to be boring to everyone except a judge, she said. I wrote the rules twice, because I knew future me would want to bend them. Then she trained my eyes. Perimeter, she said, pointing at a sketch of our yard. Vehicles, I listed the regulars, Arlene's white Lexus, Grace's navy Subaru, a landscaper's green pickup. License plates. I shrugged. She slid me a discreet wallet notebook. You'll start today. We walked the property like we were counting fence posts. She showed me how sound carried from the road at sunset, how Arlene parked to block the mailbox camera's angle, where the birdhouse caught the driveway edge. None of it felt paranoid once someone named it. That afternoon, I went for groceries and discovered gossip had a flavor saccharine with a salt bite. In the produce aisle, 2 neighbors I'd built benches for started whispering about strange music at our house. I could have recited the playlist Classic Soul. Nothing louder than the blender, but I heard Sophia in my head noise hides fingerprints. I bagged apples, paid with a card, and left without correcting anyone. Small humiliation, big discipline. Back home, Owen arrived with an old cooler and a better story. He'd found inspection tags from 2 summers ago, crumpled behind his tool bench pink slips Arlene handed out like invitations. Same wording, community harmony, property standards, cultural appropriateness. He didn't want his name anywhere. I'm not brave like you two, he said, just tired. Sophia wasn't offended. Tired men tell the truth, she said, and scanned the slips like they were artifacts. She logged the dates, took photos, put the originals back in the crumpled state she'd received them. Chain of custody, she explained when I raised an eyebrow. My view of Sophia had been a pendulum warrior, then wounded, then mystery. It stopped swinging that week. I watched her sit with a veteran's widow at the diner, never asking leading questions, just creating space, until the woman remembered the exact phrase Arlene used for everyone's comfort. I watched Sophia mail a prepaid envelope addressed to our P.O. box to a family 2 streets over who wouldn't meet face to face. I watched an entire map appear on our corkboard, dates on blue sticky notes, names on yellow dollar signs on red. The pattern wasn't paranoia anymore, it was math. The community's view started shifting too, and I could see it because my eyes had changed. Grace trimmed her own hydrangeas lower than regulation and waited to be cited. She wasn't. The Ellisons threw a party with music louder than our blender. Nobody called. The rules had never been rules, they were levers. Realizing that didn't make me feel better. It made me useful. Arlene announced a Lakeside Heritage picnic with an email written like a press release. She asked for volunteers to staff tradition stations, flag etiquette, historical trivia, proper landscaping choices. Sophia signed up for flag etiquette before I could protest. You want to wave a flag with her, I asked. I want a microphone and witnesses, she said. On picnic day, she wore navy and white hair in a neat braid and smiled like this was an errand, not bait. Arlene preened, shook hands, and gave the opening remarks about heritage. Sophia taught kids not to let the flag touch the ground, then asked Arlene with an earshot of 3 parents, which anthem version the HOA considered appropriate. Arlene obliged with a speech that sounded like a manifesto. 3 phones recorded it. None of them were ours. That night I expected Sophia to celebrate. She didn't. She reviewed footage, typed a page of quotes verbatim, and placed it beneath a tab labeled rhetoric. Words show intent, she said. Intent plus pattern equals willfulness. You talk like a prosecutor, I said, half teasing, half asking. She didn't look up. I talk like someone who's had to make good people safe without a siren. I let the answer stand. My urge to demand a resume was still there, but a bigger urge trust sat on its chest. 2 days later, Officer Ramirez stopped by to follow up. He stood on the grass hat in his hands, looking like a man who had seen enough neighbor disputes to last 3 careers. Mr. Cole, he said carefully, you folks doing all right. I told him we were playing by the book and asked for copies of each incident report to date. He promised to email what he could release. I thanked him without sarcasm. He paused, then said softly, "Patterns matter." It sounded like an ally offering a puzzle piece without choosing a side. I took the puzzle piece to the county clerk. The search terminal was ancient. The woman at the counter efficient in a way that could be mistaken for cold until you noticed the candy dish and the extra pens. I asked for public minutes from Pine Landing's last 3 years, violations hearings, recorded complaints. I paid for copies in quarters because the machine refused dollar bills. In the margins of bureaucratic language, certainty bloomed anonymous complaints, spiked before undermarket sales. The same realtor names kept appearing at closings. The same notary witnessed half the transactions. I sat in my truck and let the silence do what rage used to. It settled me. At home, I laid out what I'd found, expecting Sophia to critique my methods. She didn't. She pulled a highlighter and started connecting dots. I hadn't noticed dates that aligned with deployments, gentle phrases that hid coercion app posts, timing public pressure with private notices. "This is good work, Ben," she said. The compliment hit deeper than I expected. It wasn't flattery. It was partnership. My perspective shifted another notch the night Sophia staged a panic attack on purpose. We heard Arlene's SUV saw it glide to a stop, in the same spot it always did, two wheels kissing our easement like a dare. Sophia sat at the bottom stair, clasped her hands, and breathed fast enough to fog the air. When Arlene knocked, Sophia opened the door with eyes damp and voice small. "I'm trying," she said before Arlene could speak. "I want to belong." Arlene softened, with the hunger of someone who enjoys shaping people. She stepped closer, offered help, and this was the point grew careless with her words, about standards and safety. When Arlene left, Sophia switched off the shallow breathing like a light. I sat on the step beside her and felt ridiculous. "I'm sorry I thought you were breaking," I said. She bumped my shoulder with hers. I was bending where she could see. The night market at the marina became our listening post. People talk around music truth crawls under the bass line. I nursed one beer and caught 3 rumors growing legs a case against us. A whisper that we weren't who we said, and a claim that the HOA had friends downtown. I didn't argue with anyone. I memorized phrasing. Back home, Sophia wrote the phrases first names, second dates, last. Quotes anchor memory, she said. Names can change. I started noticing who didn't show up when Arlene wanted a crowd. Connor, retired firefighter Loud Laugh, stayed away from the picnic. Hazel, PTA queen, stopped liking Arlene's posts on the app. A crack is a crack even if it's hairline. Water finds it. The community wasn't falling in love with us. It was falling out of step with Arlene's certainty. Perspective shifts are quiet like that, a tide you only notice when the dock ropes pull. One morning, Sophia answered a call on speaker, and I heard a tone I recognized from banks and doctors, professional, recorded, careful. The caller identified as a community wellness coordinator and asked culturally sensitive questions about noise and practices. Sophia asked for an agency name and a return number. It matched our not VA hotline. "Thank you," she said sweetly and gave the disposable number instead of ours. When she hung up, I exhaled. "You're building a ladder for her to climb," I said. "I'm building a record of who built the ladder and where it leads," she corrected. When she calls higher, the call won't vanish into rumor. I finally asked the question that had been nagging me like a splinter. "Sophia, in your old job, is this normal?" She didn't rush the answer. "Normal is a hard word," she said. "Let's say I've seen this shape before in other countries and in our own backyard. People who want land or leverage learn to weaponize etiquette and paperwork. They isolate targets, especially ones who move often or who already carry weight. I heard the missing nouns families like ours and swallowed the urge to demand acronyms." She added I was trained to notice early and act late. The paradox sat between us, like a third chair we finally acknowledged. We stepped lighter through the week. I fixed a rocker for a retired chief, and while loading it into his van, he said, "Heard you're getting the treatment." He didn't have to define the noun. "Keep your head," he added. Bullies love fireworks. I thought of Arlene's smile when sirens bounced off water. I thought of Sophia's steady hand on my wrist that first morning. We're on a dimmer switch, I said, surprising us both. A small miracle happened on Thursday. Our mailbox wasn't replaced. Our oak wasn't cut, and yet nothing terrible followed. The fines threatened in cream envelopes didn't arrive. Instead, Arlene sent a reminder about good citizenship and a photo of an approved mailbox someone else had installed. It felt less like enforcement and more like advertising. The threat had always included a sales pitch. That night, Sophia laid out two paths on paper like a coach mode chalking a drive path. A. Arlene gets bored, moves to a softer target. We keep the house but lose a piece of ourselves. Path B, she escalates. We absorb the shock and we end it for more than just us. I pointed to Path B before she finished the sentence. Then prepare for impact, she said, not as a warning, but as an invitation. Preparation meant duplicating everything. We made copies of copies, stored flash drives that Owens mailed one to my sister out of state. Sophia built a clean timeline for anyone outside our town to follow no jargon, just dates, quotes, and maps. She labeled one folder for law enforcement and another for media, and I realized how far her horizon extended. Why media, I asked. Because bullies cling to reputation like ivy to brick, she said. Sunlight loosens the grip. My last old habit died the evening Arlene cornered me at the Marina Voice. Honeyed words, barbed. You're a craftsman, Mr. Cole, she said. You appreciate standards. I said nothing about the 6 custom pieces I'd built for her friends. Nothing about how standards without mercy are just sticks. I heard myself say, please send any requests in writing. Her smile faltered a millimeter. It was microscopic and enormous. I walked away feeling like I'd finally stopped playing hockey without pads. When the disposable phone pinged with a voicemail from the coordinator, Sophia didn't play it immediately. She set the phone on the table between us, the way someone sets down news that will change a family. Whatever this is, I said we're already on the same side. She pressed play. The message was bland, officious, and perfect acknowledgement of a file opened a note that outside agencies might be looped in a request for any recordings of rituals that cause alarm. Sophia smiled not with joy, but with confirmation. She's reaching beyond the lake, she said. Good. I thought back to the first morning, yoga sirens the clipboard, and felt embarrassed by my early certainty that volume equals power. My perspective had changed from hammer to level. The house we wanted to keep wasn't just wood and taxes. It was the kind of place where kindness doesn't get mistaken for weakness because it's backed by spine and receipts. Before bed, I apologized clean and complete. For not trusting your method, I said. For thinking I had to throw a punch to prove I loved you. Sophia tucked herself under my chin. You do love me, she said into my shirt. Now help me do the boring parts beautifully. We fell asleep to the lake, tapping the rocks, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't dream about sirens. I dreamed about a room with fluorescent lights, a table, 2 folders, and the soft thud of arrogance meeting paper. In the morning, the outside contacts column had a new entry, a federal callback number. The federal callback number blinked on the burner like a lighthouse unknown area code crisp voicemail. Sophia didn't touch it for a full minute. She just rested her fingertips on the table, as if feeling the vibration of a faraway train. Ready, she asked without looking up. I nodded because I finally understood that readiness wasn't adrenaline. It was paperwork and breath control. She pressed play. Special Agent Dana Morales' Office of Special Investigations, the voice said mellow and measured. We received a referral alleging misuse of military benefits, false representation, and community disturbance. I'd like to schedule interviews. Please return my call. Sophia replayed it once, not because she hadn't heard, but to map cadence and choice of words. Referral, she said softly. Plural allegations. That means our neighbor already reached up. She dialed back, her voice small enough to pass, as timid and precise enough to pass muster in any briefing. She offered dates, requested a formal location, and asked sweetly for copies of the complaint once permitted. When she ended the call, her hands were steady. We're in the sunlight now, she said. Don't squint. Arlene beat the agents to our phone. She called from her SUV and didn't bother with the porch. Sophia, dear, she sang, I've done you a favor. The right people finally know. She paused for applause that never came. They'll want to see identification. Sophia let silence lengthen until Arlene filled it with more rope. It will be easier if you admit things Arlene suggested. Regret looks better on paper. Sophia exhaled just shakily enough to register. Please don't do this, she whispered. We can fix it neighbor to neighbor. Arlene purred, and the recorder on our dining table caught every syllable. 2 hours later, Special Agent Morales called back and set the terms separate interviews first. Then, a joint session to resolve discrepancies. The location would be neutral public and easily recorded County Community Center, Conference Room B. She didn't say, bring your documentation, because professionals don't waste breath on the obvious. Sophia requested that the local police liaison attend. Of course, Morales said. We've already spoken with an Officer Ramirez. I watched Sophia's shoulders ease. A good liaison is worth a file cabinet. My interview came first Tuesday at 10. Morales was the kind of calm that makes people confess to things they didn't do. She asked about marriage dates, move-in dates, the first time we'd heard the word appropriate used as a leash. She didn't ask whether Sophia did yoga. She asked who could see the deck from which angle and at which hour. When I described the mentorship circle, Morales' pen stopped. Mentorship, she echoed neutral. I explained the flags and the tape measure the way apologies seem to generate new requirements, like a vending machine stuck on vend. Understood, she said, and slid a card across the table. If anyone contacts you after tonight about cooperating with federal efforts, call me first. Sophia's interview was the next morning at 9. She wore a blue cotton dress and a cardigan like any neighbor meeting a social worker, and carried a slim case like a paralegal. I waited in the lobby, reading the notice board 3 times without absorbing a single flyer. She came out 90 minutes later, face composed, hands empty. She asked about process, not just incidents, Sophia said in the parking lot. That's good. Process reveals intent. She didn't say what else was said. She didn't have to. I'd finally learned to trust both the blank spaces and the filled lines. The new opportunity wasn't only the federal badge. It was the way the badge rearranged the board. The HOA directors, who usually responded to residents with canned paragraphs, suddenly discovered the reply all button. Grace posted less and read more. Hazel sent me a one-line email at midnight. If they ask, I'll tell the truth. Owen dropped off a box of old newsletters with yellowing edges and a post-it that said, "The pattern has a birthday." We found the first time cultural cohesion appeared in print 3 years and 6 days before. Sophia drew a circle in the margin. Here's where the story learned its own name. Arlene, intoxicated by proximity to her imagined victory, went on offense. She pushed a community update through the neighborhood app saying the HOA was cooperating with federal authorities to maintain standards, and that concerned citizens had flagged potential misrepresentation. She never used our names, but she dropped enough breadcrumbs to feed a flock. Sophia archived the post and did nothing. That nothing was loud. When Grace texted, "Are you going to reply?" Sophia sent back, "We'll speak where records are kept." Agent Morales called again, joint session scheduled for Thursday, at one community center, the big room, because the small one was unavailable. I recognized the fib. The big room meant witnesses without saying the word. "Do you want me there?" I asked. "Front row," Sophia said. "You won't like some of it. You still sit there." I thought of the first sirens in my clenched jaw and understood that endurance is a muscle you build by not lifting your fist. Wednesday became distribution day. Sophia printed 3 complete sets of our documentation on thick paper that curled less under fluorescent lights. She labeled the spines Law Enforcement Civil Press. I pointed at the third. "We gonna hand these to reporters?" She didn't look up. "We're gonna be ready if they already have questions." She inserted tabs, timeline quotes, digital exhibits, map statutory references. I didn't ask how she knew which statutes. I'd stopped running that audit. Instead, I checked the ink levels, made coffee, and packed a tote with chargers and granola bars. Because long days fall apart around 5 p.m. for stupid reasons. The local paper sniffed the air and wandered over. A reporter with a notebook and the two bright eyes of someone who has practiced the word exclusive stopped me at the marina. Off the record, he tried. Not today, I said, and gave him the generic truth. There's a meeting tomorrow. Bring fresh batteries. He looked offended and grateful at once. I walked home feeling like I'd just learned a new dance step called Don't Help Your Opponent Edit You. That evening, Officer Ramirez knocked hat in his hands, posture neutral. He asked to confirm the time and location of the joint session and to review the perimeter camera angles in case the crowd grew. Crowd. That was the first time anyone official used the word. We'll keep it orderly, he said. Sophia thanked him, then asked a question I hadn't thought to ask. Will the body cams be on his answer? Yes, ma'am, settled something inside me. I didn't know needed settling. The record would make its own record. Arlene couldn't resist theatrics. She sent an all-community message inviting residents invested in values to attend a discussion regarding standards and integrity. She finished with a sentence that read like a drum roll. The truth loves a crowd. Sophia read it once and nodded. Perfect, she said. Truth does. We rehearsed, not speeches protocol. She walked me through the room in our heads where we would sit, where Arlene would sit, where the officers would stand, how microphones would fail, how printers would jam, how someone would try to move the conversation into hallway whispers. Staying seated is strategy, she said. Leaning into a mic is strategy. Asking for page numbers is strategy. I repeated the last one 3 times until it felt like a key in my mouth. The morning of, we dressed like we were attending a school board meeting, not a showdown. Sophia's hair was braided. I wore the blue shirt my mother said made me look honest, which I hoped meant I already was. We loaded the tote, checked the birdhouse camera one last time, and paused at the front door. Whatever happens, I said, I'm proud of you. She smiled without sentiment, the way climbers smile at the base. Whatever happens, she said, we keep our posture. I expected to be nervous about the crowd. I wasn't. I was nervous about the quiet before the crowd, the way a big room sounds, when everyone pretends they don't see everyone else. The community center smelled like pencils and vague nostalgia. Folding chairs clicked into rows. Hazel sat 2 seats from the aisle. Owen hovered near the wall like a man who knows how to leave quickly if needed. Grace arrived late and didn't sit with Arlene. Small details, big tells. Agent Morales entered with a colleague who wore the kind of suit that makes people behave. Ramirez came in from the side door, nodding at people he recognized without handing out smiles. Arlene swept in last, framed by 2 board members, and a confidence that bordered on giddy. She took a front row seat facing the table as if it were a stage. In a way it was. Morales began with rules. She didn't say ground rules, a phrase adults use with children. She said, this is an official interview in a public space. We'll proceed one person at a time. Recorders are visible and approved. I will ask that questions be addressed through me. Arlene raised her hand before the sentence landed. Agent, she said, I've brought documentation of theft and deception. She held up a folder like a chalice. Morales nodded without changing expression. We'll receive your documents after we verify identities, she said. The phrase hung like a curtain about to lift. Arlene couldn't help herself. Watch closely, she told the room, playing master of ceremonies. It's very hard to forge what you don't understand. A few people shifted in their seats, the communal body, realizing it had signed up for more than a budget update. I stared at the tabletop to stop staring at Arlene. Sophia's knee touched mine under the table for exactly 1 second. The shock of calm ran up my spine. Morales began with me name address, length of residence relationship to Sophia. Then she turned to Arlene, name position basis for complaint dates. Arlene delivered paragraphs polished in her mirror, unfamiliar practices, safety concerns, heritage standards. She avoided certain words, and yet you could hear them walking around outside. Morales wrote Ramirez watched, and Sophia waited. Then came the hinge. Ms. Cole, Morales said, for the record, please present identification. Sophia reached for her bag and paused. Her hand trembled exactly once and then didn't. She pulled out her wallet, a slim folio, and an envelope marked copy. She was going to let Arlene see what she'd been begging to see for 6 weeks, but on our timing, under our lighting on the record. Arlene leaned forward, smile sharpening. Before we proceed, Sophia said softly, May I submit documentation pertinent to the complaints? Morales nodded. Sophia set a single-page index on the table, followed by a thin stack clipped at the corner timeline of calls and visits, verbatim quotes from posts and emails, an exhibit list of recordings with time codes, and a map of the neighborhood showing lines of sight. Arlene rolled her eyes in amateur's tell. Stalling, she declared. It won't work. Sophia didn't look at her. Nothing here is rushed, she said. Outside in the hallway, a reporter's voice warmed up. Inside, the air cooled with attention. Morales reviewed the index, flipped 3 pages, and then turned her pen upside down for a second, the bureaucrat's equivalent of leaning forward in a movie theater. Thank you, she said to Sophia. We'll mark this as Exhibit A. She looked at Ramirez. Please note the pattern language. He nodded, writing. I felt the floor under the room settle like a dock, taking a small wave well. Arlene couldn't tolerate a frame she didn't own. She stood uninvited and addressed the neighbors. Real Americans, she declared, don't need indexes to tell the truth. The sentence did not land how she expected. Hazel's face compressed. Owen murmured something to the wall that might have been a prayer. Morales held up a palm. Ma'am, you will sit until you're invited to speak. Arlene sat. The lesson was delivered without malice and with authority, and even from across the table, I felt my breathing find a pace I could keep. Sophia placed her wallet on the table. The room leaned with it. The opportunity we had been rock polishing for weeks, letting a bully choose the crowd, and then showing the crowd a mirror was finally here. I realized what new opportunity had meant all along. Not just a path out for us, but a door that once opened would be hard to close for anyone who had ever been told to be small and grateful. Sophia looked at me, and I could read the line she didn't speak. We will not rush the last 10 feet. Agent Morales nodded. Whenever you're ready, Ms. Cole. Sophia touched the card with her thumb the way someone tests a bridge before crossing. Then, calm and deliberate, she lifted her identification toward the light. Agent Morales angled the desk lamp so the card faced the room, not the ceiling. For the record, she said. Sophia held the plastic between forefinger and thumb. No flourish, no drama, just a clean presentation. The laminate caught the light. The seal flashed. The letters were boring in the way truth is boring. United States Air Force. Under the photo, Reyes Cole, Sophia M. Under that, Laud Cole. Arlene's face did something I'd never seen it do, nothing. No tilt, no smirk, no smugness. All the expressions she'd practiced in mirrors for years deserted her at once. You could hear the chairs adjust a collective shiver of plastic and realization. Ramirez read the details for the audio name rank active status assignment. The room inhaled like a single lung. Sophia didn't gloat. She didn't glance to see who had gone pale. She set the card flat, anchored it with 2 fingers, and slid the index of exhibits across the table. Agent, you asked for process and pattern, she said, voice even no tremor left. Exhibit A is timeline. B is excerpts. C is recordings with timestamps. D is financial linkages connected to distressed sales. E is sworn statements from prior residents. She stopped there. The list could have kept going, but restraint is a kind of authority. Morales nodded once the nod professionals give other professionals. Ma'am, walk me through your documentation protocols. That's when her shift mine, fully happened. For 6 weeks, I'd watched Sophia shrink on cue to bait a bigger cruelty. Now she expanded into her real size, not to dominate, but to fit the room with steadiness. Every contact logged within 10 minutes, she said. Originals preserved. Copies watermarked. Chain of custody annotated. Off-site backup. She spoke like someone who had found the exact note the room would carry. Arlene tried to reanimate her confidence with noise. This is a trick, she blurted. Anyone can print a Morales lifted a palm. Ma'am, I've already confirmed the credential through official channels. Not loud, deadly effective. You could feel the crowd recalibrate like a boat settling after a wake. Hazel stood up from the 3rd row without waiting to be called. I have something, she said, palms open. I saved messages. She held her phone like a confession. Morales gestured to Ramirez, who collected the device and issued a receipt. Grace remained seated, eyes glassy, as if she'd misplaced the script she always used to have. Sophia turned to me, not the crowd, not Arlene, me, and the look asked a question older than ranks and badges. Can you hold steady while I stop hiding? Speak to motive, Morales said. Sophia did not raise her voice. The language, cultural cohesion, appropriate displays, foreign ritual, was used selectively to isolate, then fine, then force quick sales, she said. The targets were families who move often and won't sue service members, transfers widows. She didn't say victims, she said targets. It mattered. I watched her take off another layer of armor I hadn't even known she wore. Why didn't you disclose your status earlier? Morales asked for the record. Sophia answered for the record, and for me, operational security, ma'am, and effect. If I identified myself on day one, Ms. Whitaker would have shifted to a softer target. I needed her full pattern, not a taste. She looked at me for the first time while saying it. My chest felt both crushed and light. This was the truth that doesn't flatter anybody, love, sometimes requires the ache of not knowing yet. Arlene rallied the only way bullies know how, by doubling down. She's not one of us, she said to the room, rolling the U.S. like a marble. Real Americans don't, Owen stood. Finish that sentence, he said, voice gravel, eyes tired and clear. Finish it so the mic can hear you. Arlene didn't. Morales asked Ramirez to read excerpts from Exhibit B. He read Arlene's posts word for word, her mentoring emails, her notes about good neighborhoods, staying good. Each syllable sounded different when spoken by someone in uniform, under fluorescent lighting. That's part of character growth no one teaches you sometimes. You have to hear your enemy's favorite words in a mouth that isn't theirs to recognize the rot. Mrs. Whitaker Morales said pivoting you filed referrals, alleging fraud and misrepresentation. Arlene lifted her folder, but her hands weren't steady. We take false reporting seriously, Morales continued, particularly when the subject is a service member on active orders. The words didn't thunder. They landed like stamps on envelopes, official, inevitable. Sophia did something then that surprised me more than the badge she asked permission to speak directly to Arlene. Morales allowed one question. My wife turned not disdainful, not cruel. You could have stopped on day 2, she said simply. You were asked to leave our porch. You were given community. You chose leverage instead. No theater, just the plain diagnosis of a surgeon who has seen this wound before. Arlene laughed, a brittle sound. You're overreacting, she said. These are standards. Sophia nodded once. Exactly, she said. Standards without equal application are just weapons with pretty names. Her voice didn't shake. Mine did, and I wasn't even speaking. Morales closed the first ring of the procedure. We'll be taking statements from board members and reviewing financial records tied to distressed transactions, she said. Ms. Whitaker, do not delete, alter, or move any documents, devices, or accounts referenced here. Doing so would be obstruction. You could hear the word obstruction draw oxygen out of the space between rows. Ramirez cleared his throat. For the local record, he added, we've documented 4 unsubstantiated calls within 14 days. He looked at Arlene, then at the room. Harassment statutes apply inside HOA boundaries, too. Hearing a patrol officer speak the word harassment like a fact and not a threat cracked more than one mask in that crowd. And me, the guy who thought swinging was bravery, I felt something unclench that had been clenched for weeks. Growth sometimes looks like shutting up at the right time. It sometimes looks like learning to let the right person carry the right weight. I squeezed my knees together under the table to keep from grabbing Sophia's hand in a room where optics mattered. Morales recessed for 10 minutes to copy IDs and index exhibits. The room exhaled into whispers. Hazel approached us in the aisle with the cautious courage of someone switching sides while the stadium lights are still on. I'm sorry, she said to Sophia. I thought you were... She didn't finish the sentence. Sophia did not rescue her. I accept the apology you will make with your statement. She said, gentle and firm. Growth again, mercy, plus accountability, not one without the other. In the hallway, the reporter hovered. Colonel, he began wrong on the rank. Sophia corrected him without sting. Lieutenant Colonel, she said, and I won't be commenting. You'll get documents when they're public. Then, She added a sentence that landed in me like a cornerstone. You can still tell it, right? She wasn't trying to win a headline. She was trying to build a record durable enough to survive 1,000 retellings. I saw then how she measures time not in days, but in future safety. Back inside, Morales resumed with logistics, devices to be imaged, a follow-up date, coordination with the U.S. Attorney's Office, if warranted. Arlene's lawyer, who had been texted frantically during recess, still hadn't arrived. Control is a poor substitute for counsel. Sophia asked for one more procedural note on the record. Please direct any future welfare checks through OSI Liaison, she said. We will not be using the HOA app for safety communications. Translation, you don't get to weaponize community again. Morales agreed. Ramirez agreed. The room understood more than it admitted. Then came the small, private growth I didn't know I was waiting for. While Morales spoke with board members, Sophia turned to me and in the din of paper and policy, whispered a sentence that reset my spine. I should have trusted you sooner, she said. It wasn't an apology for strategy. It was an apology for loneliness. I'm learning partnership under fire, she added. I nodded, not to forgive. There was nothing to forgive, but to acknowledge the bridge thrown down between us mid-river. I'm learning quiet that fights, I said back. Morales turned to Arlene with the steadiness of a person who has served more than one warrant. Ma'am, you'll accompany us to provide immediate access to HOA records, she said. You're not under arrest at this moment, but you are not to leave. The words at this moment wobbled Arlene's knees more than handcuffs would have. Control slipped from her like a shawl. On our way out, neighbors parted like water around a stone. Some nodded, some couldn't meet our eyes. Owen touched my shoulder. Good posture, he said quietly. Our private code for staying seated when you want to flip a table. Grace hovered, mouth open, then closed, then open again. Growth isn't universal. It's contiguous. It spreads to the next person who's ready. We stepped into the sunshine, which felt less like victory and more like accurate lighting. Reporters murmured. Cameras clicked. Sophia didn't speed up or slow down. Home, she said. Like a task, not a destination. We drove without music. Halfway back at the stop sign near the bait shop, she spoke the piece I think I'll remember at 80. I hate that I had to be two people, she said. But I didn't know how else to keep future families off that list. Then softer, I won't be two people with you again. I believed her not because she swore it, but because she'd chosen to say it when nothing obligated her to. At the house, she changed out of the blue dress and into jeans and a gray tee, the uniform of a civilian Saturday. We made grilled cheese. We ate standing up. We laughed once at the absurdity of buttered bread being the first normal thing in weeks. Growth rarely throws confetti. It pours you coffee and hands you a dish towel. Ramirez called that evening to confirm chain of custody receipts. He thanked Sophia for orderly exhibits. Makes our job cleaner, he said. After the call, I said the quiet part out loud. I was jealous of your strength, I admitted. Not because you had it, because I didn't know where to put mine next to it. She cupped my face like we were 25 and broke figuring out rent. Put it exactly here, she said. On the boring parts. On the days after. We walked the dock at dusk. The lake held the last light like a secret. Across the water, the Whitaker house was mostly dark. For the first time, I didn't see a fortress. I saw a place where someone had spent too long mistaking control for safety. That didn't excuse anything. It explained the shape of a ruin already forming. And me, I stopped rehearsing speeches no one needed and started learning forms I'd never wanted to fill statutes I'd never bothered to know. I learned the names of neighbors' kids and the name of the county clerk's dog, Peaches. I learned that the bravest sentence I will ever say might be, "Please show me the page number." I learned that courage can be a calm hand, sliding an ID toward the light, and a carpenter nodding at a federal agent, and a community deciding one person at a time to stop outsourcing their spine. When the call came late, measured from Morales to say federal subpoenas were being issued in the morning, we didn't open champagne. We opened the windows. The lake air moved through our rooms like a benediction. Tomorrow will be loud, Sophia said. Tonight we sleep. We did. And for the first time since the first siren, my dreams were simple wood shavings, the smell of glue, the feeling that the floor under us would hold. Subpoena Day didn't look like a movie. It looked like minivans in the HOA lot, a copier whining behind thin walls, the IT contractor wheeling in a gray case with cables that made Arlene's smile hiccup. Agent Morales thanked people by name-signed chain of custody labels and asked for the login to the Community Standards Drive. A board member tried to stall by blaming the printer. Morales handed him a pen. When the server backup arrived time-stamped and boring, I understood what justice actually sounds like, not gavel bangs, but paper moving where it's supposed to go. Arlene's confidence kept trying to resurrect itself like a pop-up you thought you'd closed. She whispered in corners, paced hallways, placed 3 speakerphone calls in a tone that used to work on contractors and brand new teachers. The IT contractor never looked up. His screen reflected spreadsheets and a mirror she couldn't control. When Morales asked for Arlene's phone, she hesitated one heartbeat too long. Ramirez wrote the time down without commentary. A small, ordinary moment. An enormous line crossed. The indictment came 2 weeks later. No sirens, no spotlight, just a press release with carefully stacked paragraphs, false statements to federal investigators, wire fraud, conspiracy tied to referral fees, interference with civil rights obstruction. A second page listed cooperating witnesses and a bland promise to pursue additional actors as appropriate. The neighborhood app went quiet in a way that felt like a hand leaving a throat. Arlene's lawyer called it overreach. The U.S. attorney called it the beginning. Court was fluorescent lights a flag, in the corner microphones that made even gossip sound official. I sat behind Sophia while the clerk read the counts. Arlene stared at the table like it owed her something. Her plea was not guilty, but the confidence had lost its shine. After the hearing, Morales spoke to 3 reporters on the sidewalk and used the same verb she'd used at our dining table document review, corroborate. She never said heroes or villains. She never said our names. It was perfect. Consequences rippled outward, the way stones teach water to remember. 2 board members resigned and discovered that stepping down is not the same as stepping away from responsibility. The brokerage paused operations. The not VA hotline number vanished from the website the same day a preservation order landed on their inbox. Marinara dinners that had been networking events turned into very quiet nights at home. The rumor mill tried to spin new gears and came up dry. You can't grind truth that already put itself in writing. I waited for Sophia to glow with vindication. She didn't. She slept, then read, then wrote memos in a voice that sounded like if empathy earned a law degree. OSI sent a formal commendation on letterhead, stiff enough to deflect rain, and a note from a general who called her precise when calm mattered. She placed it in a file labeled personal and put the file in a drawer where we keep silly photos and our first lease. I asked why. Awards are mirrors, she said. They're not the work. The HOA held special elections, the kind of meeting people used to avoid. Now the parking lot filled before sunset. Owen nominated Hazel for secretary. She nearly fainted and then accepted. Grace, who looked like she hadn't slept since the hearing, stood up and confessed she'd believed standards meant fairness until she'd heard her own messages read aloud. She didn't weep. She asked for a vote on a resolution named after what we should have had from day one, equal application. It passed so fast the motion barely had time to settle on the table. We replaced the bylaws binder with a 1-page policy. Anyone could teach a teenager. If it's a rule, it applies to everybody. If it's a safety issue, call the real number. No anonymous complaints, except for threats or abuse. All inspections scheduled, all guidance in writing, all fines appealable. We added a sunshine clause. Any board conversation about enforcement gets summarized to the community within 7 days. The board printed the policy on heavy paper and taped it inside the community center window. People took selfies beside it like a landmark. Our yard changed, too, though nothing we owned moved an inch. Neighbors waved without tight mouths. Kids biked on our street without parents side-eyeing our porch. The bench that had been damaged community property turned out to be easily fixed with wood glue and a clamp. I did it on a Saturday morning, while 2 kids asked 100 questions about tools and justice. I told them both bluntly, Use your words, use your camera, and if someone says appropriate like a leash, find an adult who knows the page number. Arlene's house, once a headquarters, became a case study. A bank took it back. A nonprofit matched it with an army medic, his nurse spouse, and their twins who liked frogs. On move-in day, our cul-de-sac became a parade of dollies and casseroles. Sophia brought lemonade and a list of actual phone numbers. School liaison veterans, services the real county line for welfare checks. The twins caught a frog by dusk. Their mother cried once, then laughed at herself, then said thank you so many times it quit being a word and turned into a vow. My shop filled with work I'd never expected: display stands for a museum's Vietnam exhibit, a long table for the Veterans Center, 6 wooden therapy kits, so teenagers could learn sanding as meditation instead of doom scrolling as punishment. The county asked me to teach a Saturday class called Quiet Hands. I watched a kid who couldn't make eye contact relax when a plane shaved a board just right, and I thought about how justice isn't only a courtroom. Sometimes it's a bench that doesn't wobble anymore. Sophia's trajectory bent without breaking who she was. OSI detailed her to a task force writing guidance for agencies that usually don't talk to each other: base commanders, city attorneys, housing authorities, neighborhood associations. She wrote in bullet points that read like instructions for building guardrails, presumption of good faith, transparent standards, escalation routes that don't depend on whoever shouts first. A colonel with a politics face tried to make it about optics. Sophia made it about families who move 12 times before their kids graduate. They deserve policy that survives personalities, she said, in a room where people measure power by chairs. We still got mail. Some was sweet, a card from a Coast Guard wife who'd heard and felt less alone, a photo from a Marine family grilling on a patio without pretending they were intruders on their own slab. Some was bitter 3 unsigned letters with the usual vocabulary heritage: decline the country going soft. I built kindling with those. The fireplace accepted them the way fire accepts everything: with focus and without applause. If you're waiting for a cinematic apology from Arlene, don't. Consequences took her keys and her leverage. Grace would have been available if she'd asked for it with open hands. She didn't. The plea came months later, brokered by a lawyer who stopped confusing swagger with skill. Restitution numbers turned into checks. A state investigator added a report about deceptive business practices that was so dull it took my breath away. Dull is durable when you're repairing what charisma broke. The day Sophia did sunrise yoga again felt like an ordinary Tuesday that had earned its ordinariness. She rolled her mat out. The lake inhaled mist. A loon winged low. She didn't look at the road. She didn't ask permission from air. I stood by the railing with coffee and let my pulse learn a new tempo. Calm isn't the absence of threat. It's the presence of structure. The knowledge that if someone trespasses your morning with a fake complaint, there's a ladder of people who will climb down it properly. Neighbors joined one by one, the way people join anything worth their time. Hazel's husband stretched groaning like a man discovering hamstrings at 42. Owen tried a warrior pose and nearly fell into the hydrangeas. Grace came last, rolled her mat out on the edge and said, "I'm learning." Sophia said, "Me too." The sentence did more repair than any memo we'd mailed. Community isn't a noun you inherit. It's a verb you practice. We built a new bench for the community center and screwed a small brass plaque to the back where hands naturally rest. It reads, "Fairness is the standard." Not fairness for veterans only or newcomers only or long-timers only. Fairness that doesn't need a qualifier. When kids ask what the plaque means, I say, it means you don't make special rules for your friends. When adults ask, I say the same thing and watch them decide whether to be insulted or relieved. People ask how I changed, expecting an angry speech about redemption arcs and getting the last word. The truth is quieter. I learned that my best role wasn't to be the loudest protector. It was to become the kind of partner who can carry boredom like a shield. Forms filled correctly, names spelled right, files backed up the patience to ask for page numbers until bad actors run out of pages. Sophia didn't need a knight. She needed a steady pair of hands that could hold the line while she did her job. Giving her that didn't make me smaller. It made us bigger. What did the lake teach me? That water remembers the shape of what moves through it, but it returns to level if you stop thrashing. That fog lifts when you wait, but it lifts faster when there's light. That a dock you check and maintain can hold your weight, your neighbor's weight, the weight of a whole town righting itself one policy at a time. I used to think home was the roofline. Now I think home is paperwork filed correctly and neighbors who will sit through a long meeting, so the next family doesn't have to fight the same fight. One evening, a new family walked past our yard Air Force patch on the dad's jacket baseball bat over the kid's shoulder pesto stains on the takeout bag because real life. The dad stopped, nodded, and said a sentence that bent time. We heard this was a safe street. I wanted to cry for every time we hadn't been able to say that sentence and mean it. Instead, I said, "We work at it." He smiled. "Good." The boy asked if he could fish off our dock. I said yes. He didn't catch anything. He'll remember anyway. People online will turn our story into a tidy meme that fits under a headline, HOA bully crushed by military spouse. That's not the lesson I carry. The lesson is that kindness backed by process will outlast cruelty dressed in etiquette. That appropriate is only a beautiful word if you apply it evenly. That communities are only as strong as the boring systems good people agree to use when adrenaline fades. That love real love sometimes looks like letting your partner run point, while you keep the copies straight and your temper in the drawer. On the first anniversary, we grilled too much food, invited too many neighbors, and called it even. We didn't give speeches. We let the lake speak for us kids, squealing dogs, stealing hot dogs, a sunset that made everybody forgive themselves for staying up past their best bedtime. Sophia put her mat away after dinner and leaned into me, while the last boat traced a silver line down the middle of the water. "We built something," she said. "We keep building," I answered. We stood there, long after the citronella burned out, not guarding anything, not waiting for sirens, just letting a quiet earned the hard way do what it does best. Life lesson. Kindness isn't weakness when it stands on structure. That's what Sophia taught me beside a lake that had listened to too many sirens. Noise bullies you, process rescues you. Fairness only matters when it applies to everyone, especially when nobody's watching. Patience isn't passive, it's precision. Documentation is love wearing work boots. Ask for the page number, the statute, the timestamp. Stay boring until the truth can't be ignored. And when the moment arrives, lift your ID, your voice, your evidence, calm, clear, complete. I learned that love isn't the loudest defender. It's the partner who keeps copies straight and the temper sheathed. Communities don't protect themselves with slogans. They protect themselves with transparent rules, equal application, and neighbors who will sit through long meetings so the next family won't have to fight alone. Kindness with a spine outlasts cruelty with a script. If you remember one thing, remember this: fairness is the standard, not the favor. Refuse to be baited into scenes that rewrite the record against you. Choose posture over fireworks, receipts over rumors, daylight over drama. The dock holds when the bolts are tightened. Your life holds when the systems are. That's the lesson, period. Real-life applications start a proof file today. Create a single folder with tabs, timeline quotes, photos, laws, contacts. After every incident, log date, time, words used, people present, and what you requested in writing. Never argue on the lawn. Narrate calmly on camera and ask for page numbers. Request body cam footage and incident numbers. If fines appear, demand the rule citation adoption date and evidence of equal enforcement across addresses. When harassment persists, escalate on your terms, city attorney state civil rights office, or the appropriate federal liaison for military families. Share a short factual brief with neighbors who waver. Invite witnesses to official settings, not porches. Build allies quietly. Good officers, clerks, reporters by being organized and respectful. Remember the trilogy, fairness, transparency, documentation. When the crowd gathers, lead with receipts and let the facts do the shouting. You don't need a badge to be effective. You need discipline and sunlight. If this story hit home, like, subscribe, and share to help more families turn kindness into policy. Drop a comment, What one policy would make your neighborhood fairer tomorrow? Turn on all notifications for the next story.